Deb's here.
Judy's here.
Okay, I'll do roll call in a minute. It's almost 10 o'clock. I'm just,
I do have to know.
okay,
And it was good.
okay. Good morning, Indiana. I am calling the Indiana Commission on Aging meeting to order today. Good morning, everyone. We continue to have summer weather. I understand that is about to change. We'll probably go into fall real quickly here, but anyway, it's a pleasant day today. Low humidity. How about that? Okay, I'm going to do a roll call so we have an idea of who we have in attendance today. Becky Onspa. Becky, are you on today? Katie, you are on.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Katie. Deb Lambert. Fort Wayne is here.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Jennifer.
Good morning, everybody.
Hello, you are present. Steve McCaffrey
Yep.
is here. All right. Dan Mustard. Dan, are you on? Judith Schoen.
Here.
Oh, hi, Judith. How's Northwest Indiana?
It's hot.
Okay. Jake Sipe, I know, has another commitment this morning. Margaret Smith. Megan Springer. And Kelly is sitting right next to me. Okay.
Ma'am.
All right. Well, we do not have a quorum. So, we do have minutes to be approved, but we cannot do that because we don't have a quorum. But I will ask, did anyone have any amendments, corrections, edits to the minutes?
Dr. Burke, I need to know that Dan Mustard is on. He was just having some tech issues.
Okay. Well, we're one short of a quorum. Hi, Dan. We're still short. Anybody have anything that they'd like to mention regarding the minutes? If not, we will file them for approval at a later time when we have a quorum. An update, Erin is not able, she had another commitment today, so she is not here today, but she did update me on what's going on with member recruitment. We have applications are pending with the governor's office to fill the following, and that is a member who's a direct provider of or service worker employed to provide services provided through the Division of Aging, and 2 at-large type vacancies. What we are still missing is an applicant who is a recipient or caregiver of a recipient of service provided through the Indiana Division of Aging. We please help us get someone who can get nominated for this position. Obviously, it has to go through the governor's office and the appointment has to be made, but we really need to have a consumer voice on this commission. Really important. So if some of you can help with that, it would be most appreciated. Okay. Well, we have a presentation today from Kate Hager, who is working with Older Persons Initiatives and Supported Employment Director at the FSSA Division of Mental Health and Addiction. So, Kate, we are very happy to have you here. Kate is a licensed social worker in MSW. Good to have you, Kate.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay? All right. Please, Rebecca, someone cut in if you can't hear me. I do tend to mumble. Said this before at commissions. So just let me know if I need to slow down or speak up. So as Dr. Burke said, my name is Kate Hager. I am the Older Persons Initiatives and Supported Employment Director at the Family Social Services Administration, the Division of Mental Health and Addiction. And I'm here today to discuss Indiana aging and behavioral health and how collaborating and increasing coordination can help support and align systems. Next slide, Rebecca. So this is just a brief overview of aging and behavioral health, the value of collaboration between agencies and providers, the current systems we have in Indiana, the existing data that we have, or some of the existing data, and collaborative opportunities, how we can sustain that, build it, support it. And I'll close out with questions. And at the very end of the presentation, there are some best practices and resources for folks' reference in regards to behavioral health and aging. Next slide. So first, I want to acknowledge the vital value of collaboration. In collaboration, the definition and like the literal term of it is to work and to labor with another person, agency, and people. It is a process, it is an ongoing effort, and it is something that is very intentional and bi-directional. And through this, we can acknowledge gaps that we have, and we can foster overall system functioning and successfully completing similar and shared goals. There's an intersection between aging and behavioral health. It's difficult, if not impossible, to separate the two. We can identify shared populations and goals for better person-centered outcomes. And this commitment to de-siloing fosters those person-centered outcomes. We know, go back to, there we go. Thanks, Rebecca. You're fine. And we know that about 1 in 4 people have a behavioral health diagnosis. This is consistent across the lifespan. It's also consistent across payer sources. And the interesting thing about behavioral health, physical health, aging in general, is that it's very dynamic. The person that's totally filled in green here may not have, be symptomatic the next month. It can change. So having systems that are responsive to folks and their unique needs at that time benefits their overall outcomes. Next slide. And this nexus of aging and behavioral health, this intersection, means that a meaningful and integrated collaboration at the provider and state levels is necessary to effectively support individuals across their lifespan to support them. We know now better than we did in the past that there's a very intrinsic connection between aging and behavioral health, and it's more substantial than current programs structures really allow. And this kind of happened at the federal level and impacted the states, and I'll get into that on the next slide. But this disconnect between systems negatively impacts the amount of cross-sector service coordination for both aging and behavioral health providers. So there's a disconnect between the two. One offers behavioral health, one offers aging, one offers physical health, and getting everybody at the same table has been an ongoing challenge for years. And unfortunately, the reality is, and this is part of the acknowledgement, is that individuals and those that support them have to exert significant efforts to advocate for the services and supports that they need from multiple different service types. So when we're not aligned at the state and federal level, this ends up affecting providers and their families. So next slide. So I kind of talked about the federal. Here I'm talking more about what's happening at the state. And this structure that's been created both nationally and locally is that perceptions of behavioral health have influenced how services have been designed and funded in Indiana. We have the Division of Aging, which although they're one of our sister agencies, we're not well embedded or integrated with them. We're on a separate floor, we have separate offices, we have separate funding types from the Division of Mental Health and Addiction. So although services are person-centered, if you receive behavioral health services, those are person-centered, right? But the funding is diagnosis-centered. So with our funds, you often need to have a primary kind of diagnosis that relates to your functional impairment to receive that type of service. So although services are person-centered, that funding from the service is very much tied to like why you need the service, whether it's aging, behavioral health, physical health. And there are program gaps that can develop where service could be either aging or behavioral health in origin. And we tend to see this become very present or more noticeable among older adults than maybe younger age cohorts. But with older adults, it can be very difficult to parse between which came first, chicken or the egg. So we have this separation or division or silo. So what can we do about it? Next slide. We can share space and objectives. Like, we can get together at the same table and we can collaborate. Again, this is a process. It takes time and effort to foster trust, but this collaboration can decrease that siloing and increase alignment between systems. There's a whole slew of information that I have no idea how funding works over at Division of Aging, and that creates kind of this idea of, well, Division of Aging can handle it, right? They got money for aging. It just magically works together. And they're probably also going, well, Division of Mental Health has that money handled. They can figure it out. But if I don't talk to Division of Aging, I'm not necessarily going to understand there's limitations to how their funding is utilized, how it's administered, because it's a very different system than what we have over at DMHA, of the Division of Mental Health and Addiction. So just like understanding that knowledge is essential. But furthermore, identifying those mutual agency goals that meets the populations that we're serving is like a fundamental first step. Like, what are our priorities? Where do we have alignment? Where do we have momentum? And you can go from there into discussing symbiotic solutions that work for both of you and operationalizing those goals. Where is their momentum? Where are their opportunities? And you can get to some of those opportunities through a multitude of ways. Could be that you need some policy alignment. That may not be an actual change in anything. It could be an interpretation or how that policy is viewed or perceived. Some things are federal though, and we have our limitations. But again, acknowledging and understanding those federal limitations helps both agencies understand where the other is coming from. There's also opportunities for program development and again, funding considerations. Next slide. And to identify shared goals, I'm a big data person. I love data. It's a little bit of a problem, but I'm just going to go with it and continue to push forward with it as much as I can. But data helps you inform that collaboration, and it develops and pushes that shared interest. And it really speaks to, you do have a shared population together, and it is important for everybody to acknowledge it. Even at the federal level, there are data sets where the oldest like age cohort you can get to is 25 years old. You are an adult at 25 and that's it. It doesn't acknowledge that there's a Medicare payer service change, doesn't acknowledge that. Like, there are data sets that once you're 25, you're done. That's an adult. So for us, we've just been very intentional about trying to look at older adults. How can we use data to support everybody that we both work for? And this information helps establish that connection and that collaboration to help answer questions. Where are they receiving services? What services are they receiving? Are there opportunities for improvement? But it can also inform external stakeholders about aging and behavioral health matters for the people they serve as well. Again, some of these data sets are hard to read or don't call out older adults. So there are other ways we can support external folks. Next slide. And I do have some data, and this is the definition of that data. These are for Medicaid claims. They have their own limitations, and I'll kind of highlight that in the slides. We defined older adult within this data set as 50 years and above. That's a little untraditional, but folks with serious mental illness tend to die younger, at least 20 years younger. So looking at that earlier group helps prepare us for the future. But also, if we look at folks at 50 years on, we have an idea of what that age cohort may look like later on and better prepare our systems and providers for maybe the younger group of what's coming up ahead or coming down later down the line. This is from calendar year 2023. So before the pathways transition. So if I use language that's outdated, it's from 2023. Behavioral health on a Medicaid claim, we defined as a primary or secondary mental health or substance use disorder. We excluded eating disorders, physiological and intellectual and developmental causes, just to kind of reduce that data set. However, that is of interest in the future, especially the co-occurrence of intellectual developmental disability with behavioral health. Next slide. These are the most common behavioral health diagnoses. And for this graph, I just want to highlight that you can be in more than one column. And among older adults, depression and anxiety co-occur at a very high rate. In fact, if you actually break this into age groups, you notice those number 1 and number 2 bar actually kind of even out as time progresses. Substance use disorder was number 3. So very common to find things like alcohol use disorder, opioid use, and tobacco use within that column. Bipolar, post-traumatic stress is in yellow. Schizophrenia spectrum is the 4th bar, and personality disorders are a teeny tiny little sliver at the bottom. A limitation to Medicaid claims is that it's very limited in terms of what providers may put on or are able to put on the claim. If one looks into the DMHA data system, the personality disorders actually start to kind of rise up because we can capture up to 5 behavioral health diagnoses. So you can capture things that aren't traditionally billable. So that's just an interesting nuance. Just because there's only like 13,000 personality disorders within Medicaid doesn't mean that they are not elsewhere in some data systems. Kind of highlight the importance of data integration. But this proportion remains similar across all age groups. So if you break this down by age cohorts, this stays fairly consistent. Most of them are women, especially as they grow older. And people with serious mental illness age. So even though I said people with serious mental illness tend to die 20 years younger, you see people in their 80s and 90s living with schizophrenia. So I think it's important to acknowledge and understand that aging service providers, people providing services for folks that are of all age groups, should be at least knowledgeable of behavioral health. Next slide. And there are multiple ways one can look at behavioral health. And another way we looked at it was outside of diagnoses, where are people receiving their services in terms of insurance, like what kind of payer group is like affording them care. And across all age groups, we found behavioral health folks, like a lot of them are receiving Medicaid, and these are all folks in this graph that have a behavioral health diagnosis. But you find the majority of them are those on Medicaid that are not on the aged and disabled waiver. And those are the bars in gray. The yellow that you see up top that steadily decreases in proportion over time, that's called the Medicaid rehabilitation option. That is an exclusive service offered by the community mental health centers. But the interesting one is the green, which is previously known as the aged and disabled waiver. So you notice it starts off at a little sliver of folks with behavioral health, and that proportion increases pretty steadily across all the age groups. So next slide. Across payer systems, generally, folks, it doesn't matter if they have a Medicare or Medicaid plan, doesn't matter if they're Medicaid only or Medicare only. Usually the ratio is about 1 in 4 people have a behavioral health condition. Within the aged and disabled waiver, last year, 1 in 3 had a behavioral health diagnosis. So this underscores and underlines and highlights and puts arrows all around the importance of coordinating home and community-based services with behavioral health for older adults. Next slide. One thing we started to do is a behavioral health aging service pipeline. In 2023, we released a competition for funding or request for funding out to the area agencies on aging. And we awarded 7 of them with grants for 2 years. These are community mental health services block grant dollars. And it is serving individuals that are 50 and 55 and older with serious mental illness. A limitation of this grant is that it needs to be mental health related, cannot be substance use or intellectual developmental disability. Has to be that service has to be related to their behavioral health. So that shows you where some of the limitations of funding can come from. However, agencies can use these funds to supplement for services.
But there can be a comorbidity. You can-
Yes. Yes. So if they have had a stroke and they have schizophrenia, they would be eligible for that service as long as it pertains to providing them that service for their schizophrenia.
What if they have substance abuse along with?
That's fine. There just has to be a behavior, like a mental health diagnosis.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, you're not entirely excluded. It has to be the reasoning has to be for the behavioral health, and the substance use disorder can come alongside. Next slide.
And what was the level of funding awarded and what's the actual service?
I'll get into the next services on this slide, but about $4 million was awarded to all the 7 area agencies on aging. And it varies between, they are very different grants. Each one has their own nuance. But I did try and break down sort of what they're doing into different types of buckets. For most of, like, all of them are providing these services, but how they're approaching it within their communities is different. So part of it is infrastructure building. What does this look like? All of them are training their staff. Like, all of them are training their staff in behavioral health matters. How do they support not only the people they serve, but their staff? And therefore, their staff can be better equipped for identifying service recipients with behavioral health support needs. It's hard to name something if you're not really sure what's going on. So having a basic level of acknowledging a behavioral health or identifying it can better support you as a person providing services to say, hey, maybe this might help for you. And also fostering aging and behavioral health provider connections. Again, we have worked in silos nationally for a very long time. So part of this grant is nurturing those relationships and rebuilding, like, I'm not even sure rebuilding, but building connections between folks that have historically worked very differently and kind of transferred folks between one another, but not necessarily worked in a collaborative space. Some of the services are even just identifying members that could be in a Medicare and Medicaid plan or dual special needs plan, and connecting that person to their managed care provider to connect them hopefully to their full array of Medicare and Medicaid benefits. These are very confusing systems, so it's very helpful to be able to connect someone, hopefully, to their managed care provider to ensure that they're getting the services that they need and everybody is on the same page. But essentially and fundamentally, all of them are coordinating aging and behavioral health providers and services. We acknowledge this takes extra time. When you have if it takes extra time for the person with lived experience to call a bunch of people, it's going to take the provider some extra time. So hopefully these grant funds are supporting providers in coordinating and being paid for that extra effort that they're putting forward in coordinating services for those they serve. Next slide. And I'll close out that there are opportunities for sustaining this cross-sector collaboration, embedding expertise from aging and behavioral health leaders in policy development facilitates the sustained collaboration and shared planning. It's really important that there be subject matter experts from multiple different arenas at the same table to provide their expertise. Again, you don't necessarily know something unless that person's at the table to provide it. I learn something new every day about aging and behavioral health, and I work in behavioral health. But within the social services, so Family and Social Services Administration, we can continue to build data integration. Like I said, DMHA has their own data, Division of Aging has data, Medicaid has data. Combining them really helps inform things moving forward. And from there, we can also build upon identified shared goals. And that's to deliver person-centered care. And what are the steps next that we need to take to ensure that folks are getting the services that they need? Within the Behavioral Health Commission, we saw that older adults were a topic of focus where they hadn't previously had a focus before, which is fabulous. And then here we have Steve McCaffrey offering his expertise on this board. Within the Dementia Strategic Plan, behavioral health is present, as well as the Multi-Sector Plan on Aging, or Age Forward together. So, and if you're in more local spaces or state level spaces, or having a conference and you're talking about aging, bring in a behavioral health person to speak, or vice versa. Like, it's just really important to talk about behavioral health, particularly in the aging space, I feel, because behavioral health is highly stigmatized across age groups, but particularly among those who may be older. So talking about it really helps support not just the person, but providers and everybody to just simply talk about something that historically you may not have been able to talk about before. So just wanted to call that out. That should be good.
Can I jump in and add to that?
Yeah.
So this is an excellent presentation. Appreciate it very much. it's something that I think a lot of us have seen over the years and been frustrated by how to respond to. I was on one of the early choice boards like back in the day, and we spent a lot of time focusing on mental health, and out of that, we used to have a what they call it, DMHA used to have a conference on aging and mental health, and we brought in all kinds of research people, and it was very well attended. And then that kind of went away. We created a mental health and aging coalition, and frankly, I've had trouble finding financial support and grants for that, and so it's kind of mothballs. But to your point, and I agree with the grants and trying to help. We're all the grantees, AAA.
For this grant, yes.
Yeah. So that's great. And I'm gonna ask you about CMHCs in a minute, but there's another piece I just want to put a bug in your ear, and it's self-serving admittedly, but you were saying all the things I say, which is we really need to get people talking about this issue. And providers are great and they provide services, but they don't always play the same role as advocates who do a lot of public education and advocacy. And, you know, we did get, as you said, it included the Behavioral Health Commission, but it didn't exactly, I mean, it was a one-day thing. It really wasn't, it's not going to be the priority recommendation. That's all I'm saying. As a person who believes in advocacy and has spent my life doing that, I believe that plays a crucial part to make this issue to take it where we want to go. And we can't just focus, we need to focus on providing services, but we also need to focus on enhancing the conversation. And as the population ages, which we all know it is, this is going to be more of an issue, not less of an issue. It's going to be more of a conversation, not less of a conversation. And if it's not assisted with science and data, then people start saying all kinds of stupid stuff. And so that's a long way of saying, I believe there's a role for mental health and aging advocacy, and the extent to which DMHA wants to help MHA and other groups with that, you know, we would invite that. Way back when, I don't know if you know who Willard Mays is, but he used to be.
Yeah, I've spoken with him.
Okay.
He asked about the Commission on Mental Health and Aging.
He used to be at DMHA, and he was a big advocate. And there's a national council on mental health and aging coalition. He was the chair of that, and he was on my board for a while. And he was like the person who always pushed us all to do this stuff
Oh, yeah.
when no one wanted to.
Mhm.
Now I think everyone wants to, but no one's pushing it. And so I would just encourage you and all of your friends at DMHA, the more we can make this a priority, the better, and the more that advocacy can play a role, the better.
I support that.
This is
Well,
Judy. I'm sorry, Joanne. One of the advantages of having the commission is that we go around to a lot of communities, not just down there, but I'm up here in Northwest Indiana. And that we get this same kind of information that you guys give us. We take this out to the community for you and help support this in our communities. So that's where the commission comes in a lot of advantage to you guys.
I think that by statute, the Indiana Commission on Aging is supposed to be studying what is happening with aging people in the state of Indiana. Obviously, Kate, thank you so much for a presentation that is a rigorous presentation. It's not always so easy to come in and say, wow, we've got some gaps. And you talked about gaps today and talked about some ways we can begin to address some of this. I am thinking here on the Indiana Commission on Aging, there's no perfect way to do all of this. But I think, Steve, as you were talking, I think we could add another advisory committee. And that advisory committee, I'm going to kind of lean on you to think about chairing that, can pull in various voices from across the state. And we can look at evidence-based recommendations, as well as consumer voices, as well as provider voices. There's no limitation on that. The idea behind the advisory committees is to get a very broad representation of voices across the state that can be brought back into this forum and can begin to bring forward the issues. As you've heard me say a million times, I'm right at the age, or right at the top of the baby boomers, and there's oceans of us. This isn't going away. And, you know, I almost wept in the last month with what I saw happen in my local community. It's a rural community. They don't know, they don't have the resources to deal with some of these issues. And I saw some really sad things happen with some folks. And so I'm going to suggest that we add, and I should ask you without having a microphone going here. I'm going to recommend, I don't know what the rest of the commission thinks, but I'm going to recommend we add an advisory committee on this. And Steve, if you're willing, we can talk offline here, but to head it. And Kate, we'd like to keep in touch with you and try to get more voices across Indiana in this. I want across the spectrum, because it's an issue everywhere, and it's not going away. It's only going to increase. And I think it's what we by statute need to be doing, is what I'm saying. That's our role. Not that we have answers to all this, but we work together to see how we can nudge some of these changes that need to be made. I mean, I will just say this, I was at a meeting this week where Dr. Raciniak was there, and he gave a presentation, and I was just there as a participant. And then one of the presenters handed me the microphone and asked me to talk a little bit. I was like, oh, okay. And I know we do person-centered care, but I've been working on some things, and I've been working on the concept of persons in connection care. And that's what Kate was talking about this morning. An isolated patient, resident, person, client. They are a person, and obviously that needs to be taken into account, but we're hardwired, our autonomic nervous system, to be in connection. And that's what's lacking here. We just, you know, a diagnosis. Well, that's all person, you know, nobody's a solitary person. And the problem with this population is, and I'm not going to generalize everyone because it's not everyone, but some of these folks have had some real difficulties with relationships. So when they get older and you want to do families, you know, turn them back to their families, there's some bridges that have been burned a long time ago, and that doesn't work. And then your local community, that's what 3 of these people I'm talking about in my local, they didn't have family to help them anymore. The bridges had been burned, and the local community saying, we don't have anything, send them to Indianapolis. You know, that's not a solution. And we're getting more of this. And they said, we didn't used to have these people here. Well, we did, but they never recognized it. But we're getting more of these people. That's why. And they're wonderful people. They're people. And they're people in connection. They just got a couple ruptures here and there sometimes. That's just kind of where it is. So that's my recommendation. So I'll be talking with you. Anybody on the commission have any issues with this?
No, I think it's a great idea.
No, I support the idea.
Okay, we'll be talking. Anything else with Kate that you'd like to discuss, anyone?
Not necessarily Kate, but like you pointed out, to the need of collaboration and the differences, the disconnect that has existed. I just would be curious to hear if that is shifting, with Leslie sitting right here as DOA's roles and responsibilities have shifted somewhat in terms of not having direct labor oversights, like, does that free up capacity to do more things like this?
Yes.
Hi, Leslie Huckleberry, Director of FSA's Division of Aging. Yes, in short, that's our hope, right? I mean, we're still kind of in the midst of that transition process for us. You know, hopefully we'll have more official stuff to share on what that's going to look like for Division of Aging soon. You know, we've got all of our internal processes to get through as roles change a little bit, as we have some different positions on our team, hopefully kind of working through some things like that. But this is kind of the first step, and what we hope is a lot of collaboration with DMHA. Kate has been really fantastic to work with, and has just been a really great partner. And it's just been really great to have that role in DMHA as well, which has been super helpful. In fact, she and a couple folks on our team presented at the HCBS conference last month. So we are working to kind of be more integrated, partner more. And I think the more we do that, the more we identify those opportunities too. So that is the hope for sure.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful because our glitches don't go away as we get older. They just come along with us. Our policies, however, need to reflect some of a different reality today, as more of us are living longer than ever before. So thank you so much. Thank you very much, Kate. Obviously, we will be hearing more about this as we move forward. Thank you, everyone.
So Joanne, because we have pathways now, and that means more people are going to be in the community. Does that mean that our communities are going to need more resources? Like for our community, we hired a second social worker because there's so much going on that we need that extra help. Are we looking at we're going to need even more than that now?
Well, I can't respond to that. I don't know if anyone wants to respond. It sounds to me like they're trying to build some infrastructure at the state level for some of this through the grant to the AAAs. We'll be hearing more of this from the advisory committee, I think, as they kind of dig into some of this. And that would be my thinking. We'll get some more information about it. You bring up a very good point. Like I said, my rural community, they ship people off to Indianapolis if they can. Well, that's not a solution. That's just moving people around. And so I think you raise a very good point. I mean, we need some things we don't have.
I think it will be interesting with the pathways, the pathways program in general. I mean, the state has shifted 112,000 families over to pathways program. A portion of them are also receiving pathways waiver. To what role the health plans will play in identifying resources and making those resources available to families that are impacted by mental illness.
Good point.
And I don't know, and Kristen, I don't know if you know if it's appropriate to call on anyone, but back in the day, CMHCs used to have aging, and I don't know, Kate, if you know this, used to have aging point people, and they had a committee that would meet during the council meetings, and it was the aging people, the aging leaders within CMHCs. Does that still exist, you know?
CMHCs, for those who don't know, are community mental health centers.
Those are no longer in existence from my understanding. However, Zoe France would probably be able to maybe support that moving.
So
forward.
maybe if we do this committee and we talk to Zoe and I don't know, Kristen, do the AAAs have behavioral health people, like a committee or a leader in each AAA?
Not anything that would be formalized or managed at the state level.
Okay.
You know, I can't say whether or not there might be an individual agency focus, particularly the ones that got some of the grant funding. We currently have some additional capacity there.
And then do we know if the pathway plans have people dedicated to behavioral health or point people?
Within their, the Pathways program itself,
Mhm.
from my understanding, yeah.
So like a department?
That's yes. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
They,
Pathways does have, they have an actual division for mental health.
Yes, because they're also supposed to be coordinating some of those MRO, Medicaid rehabilitation option benefits in addition to Medicare and Medicaid.
So maybe that's like, and I'm not saying it's restricted to that, but that maybe that's the beginning of the committee.
Right.
Those people we did, I just kind of ticked off.
Okay, well, thank you. We're not done with hearing about this. We're going to have an advisory committee, so thank you. And, you know, that can grow as you see food invite in. It's not, we just, this is by state statute what we need to be doing, so we will try to do that. Thank you. All right, Leslie, let's hear what's happening at the Division of Aging.
Well, we're very bored. There's just nothing happening right now in our, so I'll give a bit of updates on wait list, pathways, and then sort of the other things that aging is involved with. So wait list, I'll highlight a couple things, but you know, we are trying to maximize sharing information by putting things on our website. So we did publish a dashboard last month that reflects the number of invites for the health and wellness and pathways waivers every month. We will send a link out to the commission after this meeting so that you all have it. It does reflect of those invites, how many are in the priority categories that are required in the waiver, and then how many invites were based on their level of care date. You will see in there that the majority of them are based on their level of care date. So priority category folks are bumping to the top of the list, get invited that following month, generally speaking.
It's very helpful to see that breakout.
Yes. So we will certainly continue to update that information on the dashboard. As we continue to refine different data points, we'll explore what we can add to the dashboard over time as well. Our goal really is to be as transparent as we can be. This is just a new process. And so the more experience we get month to month, the more information we'll have to share on all of that. The waitlist figures. Towards the end of August, what we had a total between the two waivers on the waitlist were 13,679 individuals, 9,248 on the pathways waiver, and 4,431 on the health and wellness waiver. So as we do invite individuals, we still have individuals applying to get onto the wait list. We're doing what we can to maximize the number of invites per month as we get people that decline, or we kind of, I'll say, scrub the list for people who may have moved out of state, may have passed away, that sort of thing, to make sure it's as up to date as possible so that the folks that we are inviting are ones that hopefully are going to be able to and want to use a spot on the waiver. But we do get reports back from the AAAs once we send them their list every month of, hey, we've contacted this person and they no longer are seeking waiver services, that sort of thing. If we can issue additional invitations that month based on some of that information, then we do. So you'll see on the dashboard, while our target has been 925 per month, we have invited more than that every month. So total for this waiver year, we've invited a little over 3,000 people so far.
How many are we getting per month? New, are you going to talk about that?
How many
new
are-
applicants per month?
So, let me see what I've got here. So it ebbs and flows a little bit, right? And so you see a little bit of a drop when we send out the invitations, and then it kind of ticks back up for the month, and then it drops again, right? So it's kind of hard to show exactly how many new ones we're getting every month. So like back in July, we had about 9,124 on pathways, and we're at, what did I say, the 9,248. So it ebbs and flows a little bit. So
we stay at about 9,000.
we drop a little bit week to week, but yes, I mean, right now that's kind of where we are. It fluctuates a lot, right? So it depends on how many people are reaching out and seeking services and get added to that wait list.
Okay, thank you.
So we do continue to monitor progress on this. Like I said, we're about 75, 80 days into the process at this point. So hoping very soon we'll have a clear picture of, how are folks moving through the process after they get invited, and then we can base that, use that information to determine, should we increase the volume of invites? What can that look like? trying to look sort of across the AAA network, what would the spread look like? So we can think about volume for them, volume for our internal processes as well. So like I said, the dashboard will continue to get updated. As we have more data points to share, we'll either, share those on the dashboard if appropriate, or share those in updates as we have them too. Yes.
But kind of what's going on is if this stays at around 9,000, by the time we get to next year at this time, we'll still be at 9,000.
So I don't know if that's what it will look like exactly. Like I said, it ebbs and flows, but we do continue to see demand, right? I mean, we continue to get people seeking
That's my point,
services. So
yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I think
We got a sizable wait list and don't see it going away anytime too soon. You may not want to
I
say
mean,
that.
I think that's, we have a lot of people seeking services. We'll try as quickly as we can, but if you look at the number of slots and the number of folks,
Yeah.
then
Just because there's
we've
oceans
got a
of
lot.
us.
Mhm.
Leslie,
Well,
you noted about 925 are being targeted each month. What's the split of pathways versus health and wellness waiver?
So for that 925, 800 on pathways, 125 on health and wellness. But if you look at the dashboard, we break down between the two waivers. So you will be able to see exactly how many we actually invited on pathways, actually invited for health and wellness, how many were in the priority categories for each waiver. And that it's a little above that targeted amount each month.
Great, thank you.
Leslie, I have a quick question if you're done, Jennifer. I didn't mean to step on you. So I believe that they're already starting to kind of look towards the next budgeting cycle. And I know that it was stated last time that, the shortfall wasn't a shortfall in estimation of money, but estimation of usage. So I'm just curious, what kind of data are you all looking at to project out 2 years so that hopefully we don't have a 13,000 person wait list, or maybe that's not in the cards. I don't know. So I'm just curious what that's going to look like for kind of the next budget cycle.
So a couple of things I'll comment on there. So we do have on our website, I think it's monthly or quarterly Medicaid financial reporting so that you can see more information on what some of that forecasted data is based on and kind of what that utilization and spend looks like across all of our programs. So one, in an effort just to be more transparent and provide more information in general, and to really get a bit more granular than maybe you would have seen on our site or on those reports in the past. So that is there if you kind of want to do a deep dive into some of that information. We do include a bit of an executive summary because it is very weedy. So in case that's helpful for folks, it's certainly helpful for me. For the biennium budget, certainly we have the forecasting and all of the work that goes into that. Recognizing we obviously have an administration change. We also have, the General Assembly that's obviously aware of these different items and very interested in understanding where do things stand with the waiver today? What would things potentially need to look like to increase the number of slots on the waivers? So I think from our end, it's really being open to providing whatever data we can to share. Here's the options that you have, and here's the impact that we see depending on the direction the General Assembly would choose to go with that as they set the budget for the next biennium. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I was just gonna ask a simple question. You mentioned the dashboard refresh. Is that a set cadence or just as you have data become available?
So it will refresh monthly. So as we get the invites out each month, it will be refreshed. So September's is already on there. Yeah. Okay. Pathways update. So we are about 80 days into the Pathways program. Our internal teams, our member support services vendor continues to work with the managed care entities on pathways, the transition plans, any issues that we hear about that come up, working with providers, with members. We do continue to have those processes in place. So as we hear issues, have teams that we send those issues to so they can look into it and address them as quickly as possible. The Medicaid Advisory Committee had a meeting in August where they gave a very robust, I think spent like 2 or 3 hours talking mostly about pathways. So I would recommend that folks watch that MAC meeting if you haven't yet. It is on our FSSA YouTube channel, but it does provide just a lot of those details on a variety of areas regarding pathways. We will have the managed care entities at the Commission on Aging in November to give some information and updates from their end as well. They will also be at the Medicaid Advisory Committee meeting in November. So felt like that was good alignment to have them at both of those meetings in November and kind of sharing that information out as widely as possible. So that's kind of a high level on pathways, and just really, I would say, watch the MAC meeting to get a lot of that kind of heavy details on the pathways stuff. But I'm happy
Hey,
to take questions.
Leslie.
Yep.
Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
You're
Well,
good.
so I was at the Leading Age Fall Conference, 2 weeks ago, and the lady that runs the Pathways program was presenting all this data of like how, phone calls that are getting answered within 30 seconds or just different statistics and stuff like that. And something I'm really going to encourage you all, and I said this at the last meeting, I'm going to say it at this meeting, I'm going to say it at every meeting until I think I'm heard. But I think it's great that y'all are talking to the MCEs. My concern is those MCEs are such a behemoth that I'm concerned that the people who report to you aren't truly aware of what's really going on in the program. So I'm concerned that like answering the phone call within 30 seconds is their automated system, and you get stuck in that automated system for a painfully long time. I have been online at the same time that I'm on a call for an hour and a half trying to get the answer to one simple question. And it's been extremely frustrating. And yet she stood up there and gave us all these glowing numbers of how great the communication and stuff is going. And I really feel strongly that we need to be able to have honest conversations about how it's going so that we can improve this. I mean, we're all understand that this is here, this is where it's at, this is what it's going to be. But if as providers, we're not allowed to give honest feedback, when we're asked, I think that's a problem. Our community is still waiting on over $600,000 worth of payment from one entity. That's a problem. That's a problem for us. So, when you consider our annual revenues between 12 and 15 million, 600,000 it's not chump change. I mean, and I know y'all look at billions when you're doing your budget. So you may think, well, that's a tip. But so I'm just saying, and then I'm concerned that, that we're not really getting feedback from the people who are supposed to be getting the services. And so that's just my little, and my dogs want to say hello. That's just my little bit on that. And then can you also, while I'm thinking about it, answer the question? I knew in the original RFP, like if people were living out in the community, the case managers, care coordinators were supposed to have like 50. If they were in long-term care, they were supposed to have 100. And then, we were told that they have like 250 to 300 and that changed in the statute. Can you tell me what the statute is now?
Are you talking about the caseload ratio for service coordinators when you say the 50 or 250? I'm trying to track
Yes.
what. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. It's ramblings of a frustrated lady.
I just wanted to make sure I was following. I don't know that offhand. I would have to go back and look, but I can check into that and get an answer for you. On a couple of the other things that you mentioned, I agree 100%. We want to get honest feedback from providers. So I appreciate you bringing up these issues and flagging things. I think if you have an example of a call that you made where you were sitting for an hour and a half and can send that information to us, what we can do is oftentimes we can pull the call information to see like, what did they report that call looked like versus like, what are we seeing? And we can maybe listen to the call if it had been recorded and kind of dive into that. And that is one way that we can try and validate. So like, if you have a call that you made that you feel like this doesn't align with what I'm hearing when I'm hearing all this data,
Yeah.
I mean, you can send that information. We can
And
look
I
at
think
it.
even asking follow-up questions like, okay, great. So you're answering the call in 30 seconds. That's fantastic. But what does that look like? Is that a human being talking to a human being? Or is that one of your little AI bots
Yes. And so
directing me?
It's an AI bot. I can tell you that now. I've had
Oh, I
several
know it
clients where
is.
I've called in
I-
and
yeah.
tried to get help. And I'm telling you right now, it is a nightmare.
Yeah, no, I know it is. I need FSSA to know that that's what's happening because they're reporting that they're meeting these, metrics. And how are we defining meeting? Just because you pick up the phone doesn't mean you're helping anybody. It doesn't mean that AI bot is helping anyone. And I can tell you they're not. But
well, and I think, yes, so like there are a variety of things that we do look at and we do measure. Call resolution is certainly another thing that is important to your point. So I can kind of go back to the team and we can talk about that more and we can have more information in November too, to kind of talk through some of those details. The other thing I was going to mention, Deb, I'm trying to remember now. So we've got the member support services vendor too. That is kind of that resource for members if they feel like they're not able to get through with the MCE or running into some challenges, to call that member support services vendor. They've been a really great resource for us because they are able to collect that information and collect trends and let us know, hey, we're hearing a whole bunch about this right now. We think you need to look into it. So that is a way that we are kind of tracking member specific feedback. So not just what the MCs are telling us, but hey, we kind of made this whole resource available for members. That's that ombudsman-like resource so that we can see kind of from that side as well. I can also tell you, we get a whole lot of emails every day from folks on a variety of things. So our teams are just kind of tracking all those different pieces as well. When you serve 120,000 people, there are the one-off things, and then there's the systemic stuff. So trying to kind of piece
right.
through some. But I mean, I appreciate the feedback. I do think this is helpful. So I mean, if you guys have experiences that you feel like, again, are not aligning with some of the things you're hearing from us, we welcome that feedback. We try and keep different lines of communication open so that you can send us that information and we can dig into it more, because we want this to work well for members. We want it to work well for providers. So I appreciate the honest feedback.
Yeah. And again, I want to be clear that I don't think there's any malicious intent. I just think that there's such a behemoth that there's a communication kind of disconnect between the reality of what it looks like on the ground and what is getting reported. Because I know when we shared this information back during that presentation from the Pathways director, she was a little bit surprised, that was the information. And I don't think the MCs are doing it with, like I said, malicious intent. I just think that they're so large that they're not getting what's happening on the ground. And, I consider myself relatively cognitively intact, and I can't imagine how difficult this has to be for people that are having some cognitive struggles as an individual person trying to get services. So.
And part of the problem, Leslie, is the fact that our clients are terrified that they're going to lose their services. So I've come to you with a couple of clients already, and they've said, you know what, I'm not going to go talk to her because I'm scared that I'm going to lose my services. So for our side, it's hard to bring you specific ones because of the fact that they're just terrified. They just don't want to come forward.
And I understand how that feels, right? I mean, they certainly, healthcare is so important, and we want to make sure that folks feel connected to us to be able to share that information. I need it though to be able to dig into some of this stuff. And so, as much as you can encourage folks that this is not punitive. This is really so we can look in and understand what exactly is happening. And we've seen a lot of things over the years, and we hear a lot of things, and the MCEs have as well. And so I think there would be no intention of retaliatory action, right? It really is so we can understand what's happening, because I can take the anecdotal information, but if I don't have a case I can dig into, we can't look at what's going on our side and sharing with, to Deb's point, these large entities that we heard there was a case where this happened. it makes it hard to make progress if there is an actual issue that we need to address because we can't drill down on it. So, but I very much understand. We do get good information, so we do get some case examples that are helpful, but as much as you can encourage folks to be willing to come to us with those issues, that would be helpful for us, for sure.
And I also just want to thank you for being open to this conversation. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
Okay, Kelly, I think had something.
I would just say our experience with member support services has been very positive for our team members and for our families. So they are very responsive. They help us identify who key contacts are. So I just would applaud the work that they're doing, at least from our perspective. I think some of the biggest challenges we've seen are on the less frequently used services like incontinence products and insure and pest control, where the health plans are denying or forcing individuals to change providers, which has been very stressful for those families. I think the other area which is getting slightly better, and I was just going to say, we finally resolved all of our billing challenges, so we are actually getting paid by all the health plans, and they did a great job retroactively, but I can only imagine how difficult that is for the smaller providers trying to work through that. The biggest challenge we've had is the fact that the plans are still hiring, and so they've not yet, in all instances, assigned service coordinators. And so I think maybe that's the point you were kind of getting to, is that we're hearing from some of those service coordinators that they're carrying caseloads that are very large, while the health plans are still trying to hire. So we have had some relationships where we've been able to share names of people who we believe are in their plan, and they've been able to share service coordinator or care coordinator contact information. But that's been a challenge, I think, for our families and for our care teams to very early on be able to make connections and understand who's responsible for oversight of care.
And if you have situations where you've reached out to the MCE and you're told this person doesn't have a service coordinator or care coordinator yet, we do want to hear about that, because that should not be happening. So we would want to hear those case examples so that we can dig into that as well, for sure.
I will share that we did hear from one of the plans that we should expect an extension to the continuity of care period. That came directly from the plan. And so I don't know if there's any updates.
I do have an update I can share on that. We will not be extending that continuity of care period. There is a bulletin coming out next week to kind of talk about this a little bit. And a person-centered service plan review has to occur before there would be any reduction in services, for example, right? Okay. So if we get to that 10-1 period and that person-centered service plan review has not occurred yet, then you're not going to automatically see something happening on 10-1, right? Like that review has to happen before there would be a change triggered. So while you're not extending that continuity of care period, that process still has to occur. It's required. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And there will be a bulletin coming out next week, I believe, that will kind of outline all of that.
I would just share.
So Leslie, I'm sorry. So Leslie, does that mean that if a client has a service and they have not seen a care person yet, their services are going to stay just as they are?
I mean, we're still in the continuity of care period right now, right? So they should not have had any reduction in their services during this period of time. Like I said, the bulletin will be coming out next week. So I would say watch for that bulletin that will explain that in more detail.
Okay, I think Kelly still had some.
No, I was just going to
Thank you.
share for our population of people in the Pathways waiver, roughly 2,700 families, we have received less than 10% of authorizations for those families from the health plans.
Okay.
Just to provide some perspective on the volume and the how far they are behind in conducting this.
So for clarity, this is the 19th of September, and these were supposed to be done by the 1st of October, and you've had 10% finished. Yikes, we got a problem.
So I will look into that. We'll look specifically for you all, Kelly, and see what things look like on our end and what kind of information we can get from MCEs on what's going on there, for sure.
The bulletin will be very.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions regarding this issue?
So wanted to give a quick update on the multi-sector plan on aging development. So we've had lots of really good meetings in the last month and a half, 2 months. We've had steering committee meetings, and our work groups continue to work really hard to collaborate and get that draft plan together, which is starting to take shape. So we'll have kind of a rough draft of the plan here pretty soon, which we'll be sharing with our internal folks, the work group leads to take a look at. We'll get some feedback from the steering committee and hope to continue through that process and have a mostly finalized draft of the MPA definitely before the end of the calendar year. So we continue to move forward on that. The work groups have been really fantastic. I'm really excited about a lot of the initiatives we're seeing in that, a lot of the strategies that have been identified. We are working to identify measurable goals so that we can really track progress of some of these different pillars and strategies that will be in the multi-sector plan. So hopefully by November, I'll have some additional details that we can start sharing with you guys on that. And then looking to 2025 to really start driving forward with the plan and getting things moving in different capacities for sure. Quick update on adult protective services. So I know I talked a little bit in July about the transition planning that we're doing and kind of the work we're doing to think about the next phase for adult protective services. We've been doing some stakeholder engagement, so meeting with different groups that have different roles in the process of the adult protective services system. And we do continue to work toward developing that RFP. So just continued progress and work on what we've been doing the last couple months. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on the dementia strategic plan. So that's another statewide strategic plan that has some work groups and committees that have done a really great job this year on taking the recommendations from 2023 and trying to drive those forward and make some good progress. We are developing the annual report that will be published reflecting the progress we've made in 2024 on those recommendations from last year. Shannon Effler continues to help Division of Aging spearhead that effort and move those forward, and have had, again, a lot of good, really great participation from different groups on all of the work for that dementia strategic plan. The other thing we're looking to is multi-sector plan on aging and dementia strategic plan, making sure those are in alignment and where we can kind of synthesize that work and really think about how can one sort of support the other so they're not operating in silos as well. Any questions on anything Division of Aging that I didn't talk about?
Okay, wow. All right. Well, Leslie, thank you so much. I know this is a heavy lift to be, I mean, we're in quite a transition period here in Indiana right now. And the meetings that I've attended with the multi-sector plan on aging are really encouraging. And there's a lot of that work that we need to do. I'm often in meetings. I know I'm the elder in the meeting, and that's fine. However, and I want people to help me get out of that spot if I can't do it anymore. But anyway, I'm kind of the elder in the meeting. I just want to share. I was in, and this underscores why we need to work on something like the multi-sector plan on aging. I was in a meeting in the last month where, and I'm not going to name any names, that would be terrible, but I am going to say it was a state legislator who basically indicated that there was not interest in what older people were doing in communities. We need to look at economic development and bring corporations in because they bring more tax revenue into the community, and the property taxes that older people are paying on their homes really doesn't matter that much. We have to look at corporations. And I kind of finished the meeting, and I mean, my mouth kind of dropped that somebody would say that, who's a legislator, but kind of yes and no. But I kind of thought, well, what's the message to me? Move to Ohio or what? You know, it was terrible. And so I'm just saying, we really have work to do. This multi-sector plan on aging, there's a lot of exciting, you know, discussion and initiatives coming out of this. And we really, one of the issues that has been identified is we really have some work to do with educating our state legislators. And we talked about the budget here today and so forth. It's just interesting because we're not responsible that there's oceans of us. When I'm talking about the baby boomers, basically, but there are. And to ignore it, I mean, you can say, oh, well, nobody wants to pay taxes. We're going to slash the budget for Medicaid next year. But a lot of us are outliving our money. What are you going to do with this? I said, the message kind of was move out of state. And it's like, really? You think anybody else wants us? They don't either. We need to roll up our sleeves and work on this. But it's an interesting place to be as a person that's older in some of these meetings. And this person is already not, I mean, you can't escape getting older unless you kill yourself. So that's not a good option, but it's interesting. We're all in this. And so aging is a real interesting thing to talk about, but thank you so much for your work.
Yeah, and I will say, in the MPA draft, I think part of what we want to do is emphasize this is why this work is important, right? So like, here are the opportunities, maybe economic opportunities, but here are the impacts if we don't address this too. So hopefully that will help a little bit with your advocacy in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, it's time for our advisory committee reports. Obviously, the Living Longer, Living Better Collaborative, I was representing that in this meeting, where I kind of felt like I was invited to move out of the state. But anyway, we have some work to do on this. So I am working on some of that as we work on the multi-sector plan on aging. So that's about what I have to report on that. Shared decision-making, Judith?
We're working on the guardianships, and I did get the plan to the judges, and so they've got it. They're looking at it, and we'll have some decision from them soon.
Okay, thank you. Deb Lambert, Emergency Housing.
Yeah, so I got a memorandum of understanding from APS, and we've been kind of going back and forth with the wordsmithing. I sent my last edits kind of back to them for the pilot program, and just kind of waiting on follow-up from that.
Okay, thank you. Lots to do in that area, obviously. Kelly, you've done some good work in trying to pull some people together who are working with on dementia issues across a variety of different initiatives. Thank you so much for that. And report on family caregiving.
Yeah, family caregiving. We put poor Leslie to work in our last meeting, having her present on all of the initiatives that are happening, many of the initiatives that are happening across the state. Multi-sector plan on aging, Dementia Strategic Advisory Committee, the Dementia Care Support Specialists that's happening in each of the AAAs. We had Kathy Chapurin from Marion County Health Department, where they've also been awarded a grant to implement the BOLD initiative, which is focused on individuals and families caring for individuals with dementia in the Marion County area, in hopes that we are ensuring alignment across all of these initiatives. And I would say all of, if not most of, if not all of the participants in the Family Caregiver Advisory are participating in one or multiple of these initiatives. So it was a really informative meeting for us. I think we will continue to try to drive that alignment as best can, or better understanding alignment. We are working with AARP in advance of the next General Assembly, where there will be a budget conversation to collect stories from families across the state where the waiting list is impacting them directly. So I appreciate the work of all of the participants of that advisory committee to bring those stories forward in hopes to arm the Alzheimer's Association, AARP of Indiana, and others with specific stories about challenges that families are facing with the list.
And I just want to encourage, if you've got some people you're working with, your provider, and sometimes I went out and helped a family kind of submit a story to AARP who probably needed a little assistance in doing it. There's some stories we need to get, and this will be really important for for the upcoming budget cycle that's coming up. And we need some information. So to submit that through AARP would really be important. So that's the kind of work we're doing in the advisory groups, committees, to try to get more input. So, okay, Dan, housing supports. Are you still on, Dan?
I am. I don't have an update for Housing Supports Committee, but we are looking forward to, I know the multi-sector plan has a committee that's going to be looking at housing. So I'm interested in some of the conversations there and some of the information that we can maybe apply at the local level from that. With the Senior Center Coalition, it's pretty timely, both Kate's presentation and Dr. Burke, your comments. Our next brown bag for the Senior Center Coalition will be on the 27th at Friday. So any Senior Center leaders are welcome to join us for that conversation via Zoom, and we'll be sending a link out for that. We're going to be talking about mental health among older adults, and specifically 988, the suicide hotline. And if any of you are in communities where you have a suicide overdose fatality review team, I would highly recommend that you be a voice on that team representing older adults. We know statistically nationally that suicide is highest among men age 45 to 55, but the second highest group is people 85 and older. And one of the things that we have found locally is that our numbers skew a little bit higher than that. We're seeing people typically in their early 70s, primarily men. And there's a very common theme that we're seeing. It's men who have been very active, quite often the outdoors type, involved in sports, and they generally have either a debilitating injury or illness, and then choose to take their own lives. Typically in their early 70s, that's the numbers that we've been seeing here primarily. There were, I believe, 8 suicide deaths in Bartholomew County last year. All of them were men, and all of them but one were over the age of 40, and they all committed suicide using a gun. So, all of those, and it was like reading the same story over and over again, very similar backgrounds. Now, the one thing that is missing from our data, and this is a conversation I think that everybody can have in your local community, especially with elections coming up. And if you have a coroner who is going to be elected, this is a question that you might want to ask them. We've had no reported suicides of anybody over the age of 85. And again, we know statistically that should be the second largest demographic represented in suicide data, and we've had none, which leads us to question then, are those being correctly identified? And I can understand that there may be there might be a decision made by a coroner that if they come in and they find someone who's 90 years old and is deceased, are they really going to question what happened? The problem is that may be actually masking an issue, a mental health issue among older adults, and we need to have that conversation. And it's a touchy subject because, as we know, in Canada, they legalized assisted suicide within the last couple of years. So there may be people who kind of lean in support of that. But again, it still may be a conversation that we need to have, even if it is a difficult conversation, it's one that we need to be having at the local level about the mental health aspects of older adults. So I appreciate the information that we've received in this meeting, and if folks are interested in kind of having that conversation informally, that brown bag will be next Friday at noon.
Dan, what's the source of your suicide data for Bartholomew County?
The SOFR team gets that data from the coroner, in our meetings. They're typically attended by police and medical professionals. And so that data comes to us from the coroner's office itself. So when folks do, and then we review each case. When we look at obituaries, and the whole idea of SOFR really is to try to identify, the red flags, like what did we miss in that person's case that can help us in the future identify some of those issues. So obviously the one that stands out to us is if you have a friend who is in their early 70s and they're suffering from a debilitating illness or injury, you might want to reach out to them and keep your eyes on them and look for those signs. And it's often missed. The stats also tell us that the majority of people who commit suicide have an appointment with their doctor within just a few weeks of committing suicide. So it's being missed at a lot of different levels when we see, what eventually happens with folks. So something we need to probably talk more about and bring out into the open.
Well, Dan, I just want to say, I think your voice here representing the Senior Center Coalition of Indiana is very important. It was missed for many years, a voice from the senior centers, and our senior centers in Indiana serve a number of older adults. So thank you for your work with the Senior Center Coalition and being a voice here at the table. Another group to perhaps think about with our new advisory group, to bring somebody in from there and maybe a coroner's office. Interesting to think about, but okay. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you.
Kristen, we're giving you a lot of time today. You got the microphone. Sounds like there's a lot to hear about what's going on too. So,
I'm gonna
okay.
try. So I'll apologize. I don't know if it's allergies or just whatever's going around. I may have a little tickle in my throat. You haven't missed a packet. It's not together yet. We'll get an abbreviated education packet out probably next week. But I do have a number of updates and various information to share. The first that we're very excited about is that right now, as we speak, our state Senior Medicare Patrol Program Director, we've talked about SMP before. Indiana administers that program I4A administers that program in Indiana. It's a program that is available via ACL in all states and some U.S. territories. And it is focused on, it is beneficiary and their caregiver facing. It's focused on educating Medicare beneficiaries and caregivers on how to protect themselves from Medicare fraud, detect it in their Medicare summary notices, report it, and also other aspects of senior financial exploitation. Anyway, she is in DC right this minute, providing as being a witness with the Senate Special Committee on Aging today. They are having their annual fraud hearing. We've had some really great opportunities regarding the Senate Special Committee. You may recall Laura Hosher from Indiana provided testimony a couple months ago on Older Americans Act reauthorization. And we were very involved with that with Senator Braun's office. So these opportunities are coming to us because Senator Braun is the ranking member on that committee and has actually been very passionate on the whole fraud front. So we're really proud that Nancy was invited to make that presentation. And so, we'll definitely share the links out. It's streaming live and then it will be archived on their website. ACL's state representative, Lacey Bovin, will be visiting Indiana next week for the first time. And most of her focus will be kind of with her state staff colleagues, but she will be meeting with us for lunch. Looking forward to that lunch and maybe a happy hour for folks who aren't able to make lunch next week. And we've met with her and done some introductions at some of the national conferences we've been to. But you know, it's different when you're actually on the turf in Indiana and meeting people in their own home environment. So we're looking forward to that visit. Related to federal legislative activity, OAA reauthorization, we hear from our national that our US Aging, our national trade association, they're very much continuing to push that forward. They really need the House to take it up. But with the election coming, they're not certain if we're going to get across the finish line this Congress. They're getting lots of uptake with House meetings on the Republican side, because Dems are potentially looking to flip things. They seem to be preoccupied and maybe want to push off discussion of that legislation until after the election. You may be following the news about continuing resolution for the federal budget. That's still expected at some point, especially given election and not wanting to upset the apple carts too much prior to the election. So US Aging is still expecting it to move forward, but the question will be for how long will it last? There was a proposal just voted down in the House on a continuing resolution, and we'll expect to see another proposal go up for vote again soon. So that's kind of what's going on at the federal level. Does anybody have any questions about that? Anything they may have heard? Okay. So we had the opportunity since we've last been together. I, as well as a number of state staff, attended the Home and Community-Based Services Conference sponsored by Advancing States. And a lot of times that conference has been, while it's helpful to me to hear a lot about kind of state policy and stuff, it's been really Medicaid heavy. A lot of their income comes from Medicaid, like managed care sponsorships. And so it's been really Medicaid heavy. This year, there was a significant increase on ACL programs that I was really excited to see. And the state staff that I've talked with have also noticed that, as well as my own AAA and state association colleagues around the country who were there. So we hope to see that continue. Part of that came from all those slew of final rules that have been coming out of ACL. And so there were many sessions that focused on implementation of those final rules, including adult protective services. So that was really good to see. There were also a number of sessions on multi-sector plans on aging. So that's definitely something that is seen as a really positive development across the country. Just kind of as a little FYI or personal interest, Advancing States has expanded consulting opportunities for states kind of as their own revenue generator. And they're finding a lot of uptake from states related to final rule implementation. You know, ACL puts out all these final rules. States need help figuring out how they're going to comply. Some of you may remember Yonda Snyder, who was a former Division of Aging director, I think 2 or 3 people ago at this point. And she has actually joined the staff of Advancing States, and part of her role is to be one of those consultants with a focus on things related to these ACL programs. So we had a really nice conversation and update at the airport on the way back. And so I was glad to have the opportunity to reconnect. She was very excited about working with state staff on the ACL programs. And that's not to say she's assigned to this state, but just in general. Just another state updates related to pathways. Just FYI, you talked some about your experience. AAAs are also still hearing from consumers that lost waiver services in the transition for various reasons and have not regained them. We are also hearing from consumers who waiver services are being reduced without having had a person-centered assessment. And we are also still hearing from providers about billing concerns, including AAAs that are providing like meals and things like that. So we're kind of caught up in some of those things too. And we continue to elevate issues to member support services and FSSA directly. And we've been trying to include specifics as requested. So providing that update.
The random loss of waiver is difficult. It's
It's-
very, very, very challenging for these families.
Yeah, there's a lot of concern out there. Some of it is, the provider didn't even want to deal with Medicaid managed care. Provider said, I'm out. And that, they don't have a provider. Others don't have a valid NOA and providers or notice of action. And providers are wary of, providing those services without what they consider to be a valid NOA. Even with all the policy around continuation of care in place. So those are some of the things we're seeing. Others might be an inaccurate NOA.
You
Where
want to explain what an NOA is?
notice of action, which authorizes the waiver services to the provider. For example, other concerns would be an NOA that is inaccurate, from before the transition to after the transition. So Kelly, you probably see those as well.
Well, I was just, it's not necessarily tied to the NOA, it's just that they are no longer eligible for waiver. For unidentified reasons, like we're really seeing
Okay.
a high volume of those individuals.
So this is for individuals, not for providers.
No, yeah, for individuals.
For individuals,
Who had a waiver on 7-1, but somehow,
fell off waiver eligibility. Yeah, that's more of a new one for
Whoa.
me. So, yeah, if, we'll be on the lookout. But as Leslie suggested, when we find those cases, we are trying to document specifics as best as possible, and elevate those, both case by case, as well as some systemic issues that we can provide examples for. So, what have we been up to at I4A? We have been focused on in-person legislative meetings at all the AAAs this summer and fall. And between kind of the HCBS conference and all these road trips, the song "I've Been Everywhere" from Johnny Cash is going through my head at the moment, if you remember that one. When we are meeting at the AAAs, we are hearing from legislators on their experience of constituent engagement on pathways transition and the waiver waiting list, and also sharing the AAA experience, just kind of that dialogue. Interestingly, and this is my personal evaluation, other people may have different opinions, the legislators really seem to be focused on the waitlist issues. Like they kind of get that, right? Where they get confused or conflate things or just kind of ignoring it, is on pathways transition. And in a lot of cases, those two things are combined, right? There's effects. So hey, we've got waiver waiting list issues here, but by the way, we've got existing waiver consumers that are having difficulties, and sometimes they're having a hard time understanding those are two separate issues. There's kind of a third category of people who were on the waiting list, kind of in the process of getting their way toward waiver eligibility, and got caught up in some of that administrative got caught up in the imposition of the wait list while they were still going through Medicaid eligibility, or waiting to become Medicaid eligible. And it's providers who had started providing service expecting that. And so we know OMPP is working on that for that set as well. But anyway, legislators, they're having a hard time teasing all this apart and really understanding, because it's very complicated, and really understanding that the wait list is different from pathways transition. We've got issues related to both. And we need you to focus on both because you're providing oversight on the transition. And by the way, we need you to appropriate more money for waiver. It's just kind of teasing apart all that messaging is hard. As they're kind of getting it, in the meetings, they seem to, the light bulb kind of goes off and you can say, oh, you can tell they're starting to understand it a little more in depth. But the main point is those conversations need to continue regularly. We're not just going to be able to talk to them once. and think they understand it, because they think they understand it, then they go away and it kind of gets mixed up again. We are also talking with them about our public policy agenda for fiscal year, coming up in the 25 General Assembly. It's primarily focused on choice program advocacy. Just as an aside, when we have a waiting list, we also see the choice waiting list go up as people try to get on a program that can serve them. One of our primary advocacy pitches is, hey, we need more money in choice. Let's just eliminate that transfer to waiver match. So we had a little bit of that reduction this past budget session, and that has certainly helped a lot. But we need to just get rid of that altogether so we can put more money into choice. Choice really is the state's best way of preventing decline to waiver eligibility, to Medicaid eligibility. And we've really been emphasizing that with legislators. Even though choice is all state funding, Medicaid is going to cost more overall to the state, because you not only get the waiver in-home services, you get all the health care with it. So we don't want people declining to Medicaid eligibility, and choice is the way to do that, is our advocacy line. Of course, we're also talking about increasing the overall appropriation, but everything we're hearing is that's going to be a really difficult ask. As in last year, we're making a run again at divorcing the ties to Medicaid administration for rates and provider requirements. And we're also wanting to just expand eligible choice activities to get more of that prevention related to providing dementia care coaching through choice that folks are doing now in conjunction with IU Geriatrics, as well as an option for expansion to more evidence-based prevention activities, which currently only happen under Older Americans Act funding now. But we feel like a lot of those prevention activities are so health-directed that they, again, get to that prevention and decline to Medicaid eligibility. There's been a couple mentions of the dementia specialist program in today's meeting. We're going to continue to advocate for that appropriation. And we are also monitoring and supporting the Age Forward Together multi-sector plan on aging. And the final component of our plan is to, for those AAAs that will now be non-conflicted because they are not doing service coordination in managed care, for them to continue to participate in the level of care assessment opportunities post next July, most likely as a subcontractor to Maximus to do in-home assessments. But we want to kind of work that angle as a way to keep AAA services engaged with the community as a whole. We've had the opportunity, if you get the chance, I've had the opportunity to be both in Evansville a couple weeks ago, as well as South Bend just this past Friday. SWRCA is building an addition that's really going to expand the kinds of things they can both do for the community, as well as enhance the administration of their own area agency on aging. SWRCA does operate a full-on senior center. And so part of this building expansion will allow them to kind of move some things around and actually expand their senior center opportunities, as well as provide, meeting space for staff meeting, public meetings, things like that. In South Bend, we had our board meeting up there, an in-person board meeting for the first time in a long time. And we got a tour of the Milton Village Adult Day facility, which is like lots of wows, breathtaking, incredible. It is modeled after the program in the Netherlands that looked at kind of a village concept for nursing facility care and kind of helping people to feel integrated in the community within their facility. This is the first adult day program that this Netherlands group has approved internationally. It's just really amazing, and everybody is now jealous and they want one in their own communities. But if you get a chance to be there, be up there, hop in, ask for a tour. Two final things. When before the Medicaid managed care RFP, a lot of the managed care entities were sprinkling money around to show community engagement. We've talked a lot about the investment that Humana made. We had a $50,000 grant where we worked on that housing paper and did housing specialist training, things like that. They had a conditional post award, their own award, right? If they got a contract, they had agreed to invest in an additional $150,000 with I4A. And originally we thought that we were going to maybe pay for some housing specialists and AAAs around the state. But since things have developed, they have actually asked us to use that money for emergency eviction prevention and utility bill disconnection payments. So we're waiting for their final letter of agreement to us. We've agreed on the program design, just waiting for their kind of to work its way through their admin. But that $150,000 will be distributed on a formula basis, mostly statewide. And it will be up to $2,000 of assistance per individual to assist with eviction prevention or utility disconnection. And AAAs will be able to manage their allocation as they see fit up to that $2,000. So this is a minimum of potentially like 65 people statewide. It kind of depends on whether the AAAs will want to use, they're going to have the ability to use a little bit of their allocation for administrative. It's not that much money, so maybe they'll just, it just really depends on how they want to allocate that funding. So anywhere between 65 and maybe 80 to 90 individuals may be assisted statewide. So it's certainly, when you look at the need overall, a drop in the bucket, but we are considering this kind of as a pilot project for perhaps even other MCEs to invest in that kind of eviction prevention and utility disconnection emergency assistance. So once that gets rolling, we'll provide updates on that. And finally, with the health and wellness waiver continuing to be integrated into the Division of Disability and Rehabilitation Services, I went to the DDRS Advisory Committee meeting yesterday, and we've connected the AAAs with the ongoing meeting information for that. So we're really looking forward to having a lot of learning and engagement with that committee and DDRS. It seems that the committee, as far as I could see, meets monthly mostly. Lots of engagement, a real emphasis on family transparency. And then the H&W waiver will be part of waiver reset activities for post 2025. So they're kind of trying to redesign all their waivers, all their access to services, whether it be H&W, the community integration and habilitation waiver, the family support waiver, other services that they're providing, and really kind of redesign and make sure that that home and community-based service system and that division works as efficiently as possible. They've commented a lot that when the system was designed, it had a much larger focus on adults. And there have been, over the decades, a significantly increased demand by families with children. And the system isn't designed to be as responsive to those sets of needs. And so they want to ensure that any reset and redesign will meet people's needs across the lifespan, as opposed to a system that was really more designed around adult needs. So that is my report. Thank you.
Kristen, I have a question.
Yes.
This is Judy. You said you wanted to eliminate something and go directly to choice. Can you explain what that was?
Oh, currently this has been in place as long as I've been there, like 20 years. Well, 15 for me, but longer than that. In the choice appropriation line in the state budget, it says, hey, the choice appropriation is like 48 million, right? But then there's a second line that says, and the state may take a portion of that 48 million out of choice services and just throw it over to waiver match. So It's actually a reduction of choice services statewide. And we've been trying to emphasize that when you do that, you're decreasing the amount of prevention that we can get into the community. So why not keep the money in choice as opposed to, and try to prevent more people from getting to waiver? So that's what that was about. We have seen that transfer. We've seen it kind of slowly decrease over the, last, General Assembly, but we really want to see it go away altogether. I think the last, the maximum transfer, I think would have been 12 million a year, this past biennium.
Why did they do that?
I think part of it had to do with, when this was first implemented, choice preceded waiver. The choice program pre-existed Medicaid waiver. And so I think maybe that had something to do with it. Hey, we need to find a way to bring waivers into the state. Waivers require a match. Let's take some money out of choice because it's providing the same kinds of services. We've also had legislators that, just as a matter of philosophy, do not want to appropriate state money that is not federally matched. So this was kind of a way to bring in some federal match around home and community-based services. But there have been some change in the legislators that are responsible for the state budget, and the person that is shepherding, Representative Thompson, who shepherds the House version of the budget, really heard that concern. In addition, I think coming from the administration itself, the governor's budget proposed a reduced transfer. And so we were able to, with that kind of support, we were able to get that through. So we're continuing to want to drive and eliminate that transfer.
Thank you.
Okay.
Kelly, you had something?
I was just gonna ask, going back to the point that you made, that I4A and some of the AAAs who are non-service providing entities might be looking to potentially, or examining the opportunity to contract with Maximus as well to provide healthcare services after 2025. It's difficult to keep up with which AAAs are contracted with health plans and which ones are not delivering services. Is there, I'm sure there's not, but is there an easy way of knowing or identifying which AAAs are not a service provider for a health plan that might be?
Right. And so the difficulty in this conversation is if that opportunity prevents itself, we may see some shifts. So I really don't want to speculate as to who would or who would not participate in that opportunity. Does that make sense? Like, there might be folks who are providing service coordination today in conjunction with a managed care entity who would rather be on the front end. Okay, so I don't think it's going to be productive to talk about who may or may not.
Okay, so just because things are the way they are today, between now and July of next year, at any point that could shift and.
Yeah, these aren't like, they're not, these are, the contracts that AAAs have are, probably at most annual, right? So, they'll have an opportunity to change their relationships at any time with the managed care entities.
Okay. Thank you.
Something caught my attention. Since I am not in the weeds, I need some help from people who are. And that is the comment that people have fallen off waiver eligibility who were probably on July 1st. I'm having some difficulty with that and thinking we may need to have a report from OMPP or someone about that situation. Can somebody who's seen this help me with this? Because I'm going to ask for it if we need to. Something's wrong here, it sounds like.
I know Leslie was out of the room, so in fairness, Leslie, one of the comments that I made, based on some of the experience that Kristen was sharing with AAAs are having, is that we are seeing families just lose waiver eligibility. Like, they had a waiver on July first and no longer have a waiver. And so I need to go back and do a little bit more homework, but I'd be happy to present some of those names to you, Leslie, so that you could review those. But we are having experience with that. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that would be helpful, specific case examples. I mean, I know I've seen a few where it's Medicaid financial eligibility that they've lost, and then that triggers a loss of waiver. So sometimes it's really case specific. It just depends. It's like if they were up for redetermination, didn't get that process completed, or were over resourced or over income at a certain point. But if you dig into stuff and you see something that shouldn't have happened, please definitely send that my way.
I will get more specifics to you.
Thank you.
And Dr. Burke, I'm happy to share that with you specifically, like what we find.
Well, I'm just gonna ask that this get brought in November, because just to be sure we don't have a problem. If you look at this and there's not a problem, fine, but I think we need to know if we've got a problem. And it got brought up here today, and I'd like to bring that back to the meeting. That would be a very serious problem. So if we don't have one, that's wonderful. If it is there, then what is happening? It sounded like there was enough going on that we need to be sure, because you're not the only one that's seeing this. So I think we need a report.
I will do that to you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Joanne, can I ask Leslie a question? Leslie, I have two clients who they got a letter saying that they had these several accounts, financial accounts, which they don't have. They're just bank accounts that they said they had no verification on them, but they eliminated their Medicaid because of it. And we've sent letters in, and there's no way to prove a negative. So how do I fix that?
So that what you're talking about is the process for Medicaid financial eligibility. And so, and I'm sure you know this, Judith, but through redetermination, sometimes we ping different resources that will let the Medicaid office know, hey, it looks like this person has a bank account that they maybe hadn't reported on. And so that's the type of information that it sounds like is getting follow-up on. I mean, generally speaking, we recommend going through the DFR office, filing an appeal if services have been terminated and you don't believe that that's appropriate. It could be something like a letter from the financial institution confirming, hey, this person does not have an account by, under this name or number or anything like that, whatever that information was that was sent back.
I tried that. I tried going to the financial institution that they said that they had an account with, and the institution said, I'm sorry, we don't do that kind of stuff. We will not tell whether our client has or has not an account here at our bank.
Okay.
I just know there's no way for me to prove a negative. There's just not.
Sure. So if you want to send that information to me, Judith, and I can follow up with the DFR team and OMPP and see, what kind of process they see for those types of cases. I mean, I've heard that come up before, right? It is hard to prove a negative, but ultimately that's the information that kind of gets pinged. So I'm sure there's processes that we can look at on how to validate or not validate whether something exists.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else for Kristen? All right. Well, thank you so much, Kristen and Leslie. Again, Kate, thank you so much for bringing some very critical needs to our attention today here with the commission. And Steve, I look forward to talking with you after the meeting, and we will initiate another advisory committee focused on, I don't know whether you want to call it behavioral health or mental health and aging, and look forward to that. If there's no other business to be brought forth to the commission, thank you all for your participation today. We continue to move along here in Indiana. We are making improvement in some of our family caregiving statistics. We have more work to do there with supporting family caregivers. I think we have to look at some of the things that we're moving along on. And again, the multi-sector plan on aging is pretty interesting. We have a lot of work to do with APS. That was good to hear about that. But we are making some progress as well as having some challenges. So thank you everyone for all the good work you're doing across Indiana. And we will see you in November, and we are expecting that the managed care entities will be at the meeting. And so I am putting out an ask to the commission members. Please, if you possibly can, in November, come to the meeting. I think it will be a rather robust meeting. And for some of the rest of you on, if you can come too, I'd love to have you here for what I think will be a rather robust discussion. So please come in person. Hopefully we won't have a snowstorm in November. So anyway, hope to see you in person at the next meeting. Okay, everyone.